Marcus Washington had worked 2 jobs for 15 years to afford his dream home in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Heights. The backyard pool was his pride and joy, a crystal-clear oasis where he could finally relax after long days managing the downtown electronics store and weekend shifts at the community center. He had saved every penny, researched every contractor, and personally supervised every tile installation. The first time he noticed the wet footprints on his pool deck, Marcus thought maybe the pool cleaning service had been careless. Small puddles led from the pool gate to the fence line, disappearing into his neighbor's yard. He made a mental note to speak with the cleaning crew about properly drying their equipment. The second time, 3 days later, the footprints were smaller, child-sized. The pool chemicals seemed slightly off too, as if someone had been swimming without his knowledge. Marcus checked the security cameras he had installed mainly for insurance purposes, but the angle didn't quite capture the pool area clearly. He began to suspect something wasn't right. His suspicions were confirmed the following Tuesday evening when he came home early from work with a headache. As he walked through his kitchen, he heard splashing sounds from the backyard. Through the window, he saw a young girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, doing cannonballs into his pool. Her blonde hair was soaked and she was laughing with pure joy, completely unaware she was trespassing. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to handle the situation. The girl clearly thought no one was home. She swam with the confidence of someone who had been using the pool regularly. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this a neighbor's child? How long had this been going on? How was she getting into his locked backyard? He watched as she climbed out and performed an elaborate diving routine, obviously comfortable in his space. The absurdity of the situation hit him. Here was this kid, treating his pool like her personal playground, while he worked himself to exhaustion to pay for it. Marcus cleared his throat loudly as he stepped onto his back porch. The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. For a split second, they stared at each other across the pool deck. Then she bolted, scrambling over the fence with impressive agility and disappearing into the neighboring yard before Marcus could say a single word. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the girl's expression, not just fear, but something deeper. Disappointment, maybe, as if she had lost something precious. He found himself wondering about her story, why she felt the need to sneak into his pool, and whether confronting her had been the right approach. The next morning, Marcus decided to investigate. He walked around his property looking for signs of how she had been entering. Behind his garden shed, he found a loose board in the fence and small scratches in the wood where someone had been climbing over regularly. The discovery confirmed his suspicions but also raised new questions about what he should do next. Marcus spent the next few days researching his new neighbors, the Hendersons, who had moved in 3 months ago. Through casual conversations with other residents, he learned they were a military family, father deployed overseas, mother working double shifts as a nurse to make ends meet. They had 2 children, including a daughter named Emma, who matched the description of his pool intruder. The picture became clearer when Mrs. Patterson from across the street mentioned seeing Emma often sitting alone in her backyard, staring longingly at Marcus's pool through the fence gaps. "Poor child seems lonely," Mrs. Patterson had said. "Her mother's never home and she doesn't seem to have made friends yet." Marcus found himself in an unexpected dilemma. His first instinct was to call the parents or even the police about the trespassing, but something about the situation nagged at him. He remembered being 12 himself, moving to a new neighborhood where his family was one of only 3 black families. He recalled the isolation, the desperate desire to fit in somewhere, anywhere. On Thursday evening, Marcus set up a better camera angle to monitor his pool area. He wasn't sure what he hoped to accomplish, but he needed to understand the full scope of the situation. The footage revealed that Emma had been visiting his pool almost daily for weeks, always during the hours when she thought he was at work. She had developed an entire routine. She would slip through the fence, carefully test the water temperature, and then swim laps with surprising skill. Sometimes she would float on her back staring at the sky. Other times she practiced diving techniques, clearly mimicking moves she had seen somewhere. She was always careful to disturb as little as possible, even attempting to squeegee the deck before leaving. What struck Marcus most was how happy she looked in the water. This wasn't vandalism or malicious trespassing. This was a lonely kid who had found a place where she could be free, even if it wasn't rightfully hers. The realization made him question everything he thought he knew about property rights and community responsibility. Marcus decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting Emma directly, he began leaving subtle signs that he knew about her visits. He moved pool toys to different positions, adjusted the pool temperature to be more comfortable for swimming, and even left fresh towels folded by the pool house. Emma noticed. The camera footage showed her pausing, looking around with confusion and growing awareness that someone knew about her secret. She became more cautious, sometimes approaching the pool area only to turn back without entering the water. Marcus could see the internal conflict playing out, her desire to swim warring with her fear of getting caught. The game of silent communication continued for several days. Marcus would make small gestures of acknowledgement without direct confrontation. Emma would respond with increasingly careful behavior, testing whether she was truly welcome or walking into a trap. The tension was building toward an inevitable direct encounter, and Marcus knew he needed to decide what kind of lesson he wanted to teach this young trespasser. The confrontation Marcus had been anticipating came on a sweltering Saturday afternoon. He had deliberately stayed home, working in his garden where he could observe the pool area. Emma arrived at her usual time, moving more cautiously than before. She stood at the fence gap for several minutes, clearly aware that something had changed in their unspoken dynamic. When she finally slipped through and approached the pool, Marcus straightened up from his tomato plants. This time, instead of startling her by clearing his throat, he spoke in a calm, measured voice. "The water's nice today. I adjusted the temperature this morning." Emma froze mid-step, her hand halfway to the pool ladder. She turned slowly, her face cycling through fear, embarrassment, and resignation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I know I shouldn't be here. I'll never come back." Marcus set down his gardening tools and walked closer, being careful not to move too quickly or appear threatening. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma," she replied, still poised to run. "I'm Marcus. I live here." He gestured toward the house. "How long have you been using my pool, Emma?" The direct question seemed to catch her off guard. She had clearly expected anger or threats, not curiosity. "Maybe 6 weeks?" she admitted. "Since school ended. I tried to be careful." "I didn't break anything or make a mess." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You're a strong swimmer. Where did you learn?" Emma's defensive posture softened slightly. "My dad taught me before he deployed. We used to swim at the base pool every weekend." Her voice carried a note of sadness that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Where's your dad now?" "Afghanistan. He won't be back for 8 months." Emma's eyes filled with tears she was trying hard to suppress. "Mom works all the time to pay bills. She says maybe next year we can afford pool passes for the community center." The pieces fell into place for Marcus. This wasn't about entitlement or disrespect. This was about a child trying to maintain a connection to happier times with her deployed father, finding solace in an activity they had shared. The pool represented more than just recreation. It was a lifeline to memories and a coping mechanism for loneliness and uncertainty. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. "Would you like to swim now? Properly through the front gate instead of climbing fences?" Emma stared at him in disbelief. "You're not calling the police?" "Should I be?" Marcus asked with a slight smile. For the first time since he had discovered her trespassing, Emma's face lit up with genuine joy. "Really, you'd let me swim?" "On one condition," Marcus said, his tone becoming serious again. "We need to talk to your mother first. I don't want her wondering where you are or thinking something terrible has happened to you." Emma's expression clouded with worry. "She's going to be so mad. She works so hard, and I've been lying to her about where I spend my afternoons." Marcus understood the complexity of the situation. Emma was clearly a good kid who had made a questionable choice out of loneliness and desperation. Punishing her seemed less important than finding a solution that addressed the root cause of her behavior, while teaching her about honesty, respect, and community. Emma's mother, Sarah Henderson, arrived at Marcus's front door that evening, looking exhausted and worried. Emma had reluctantly called her at work, explaining only that she needed to come to the neighbor's house immediately. Sarah's nursing scrubs were wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, and her face showed the strain of managing everything alone while her husband was deployed. Marcus invited them into his living room, offering sweet tea and trying to put Sarah at ease. Emma sat rigidly beside her mother, clearly dreading the conversation ahead. Sarah's initial reaction was exactly what Emma had feared: embarrassment, anger, and profuse apologies to Marcus. "Emma Henderson, I cannot believe you've been trespassing on this man's property." Sarah's voice cracked with exhaustion and disappointment. "After everything we've taught you about respecting other people's belongings." "Marcus, I am so sorry. Whatever damage she's caused, we'll pay for it." Marcus held up a gentle hand to interrupt. "Mrs. Henderson, there's no damage. Emma has been very respectful of the property, but I think we need to understand why this happened before we decide how to handle it." What followed was an emotional conversation that revealed the depth of the family's struggles. Sarah worked double shifts to cover the mortgage and living expenses while her husband's military pay was reduced during deployment. Emma spent most of her summer days alone, with strict instructions not to leave the neighborhood, but few options for entertainment or social interaction. "She talks about swimming with her dad constantly," Sarah admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "It was their special thing. I know she misses him terribly, but I can't afford pool memberships or swim lessons right now. I thought she was just playing in the backyard when I was at work." Emma finally found her voice. "I wasn't trying to steal anything or cause trouble. I just missed swimming so much. When I saw Mr. Marcus's pool through the fence, it reminded me of swimming with Dad. I thought if I was really careful and didn't hurt anything, maybe it would be okay." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He recognized the loneliness of a child trying to navigate adult problems with limited options. He also understood Sarah's impossible position, working herself to exhaustion while trying to provide for her family and missing important moments in her daughter's life. "I have a proposal," Marcus said carefully. "What if Emma could swim here sometimes with permission and some ground rules?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh, we couldn't ask you to do that. You don't even know us, you're not asking." "I'm offering," Marcus clarified. "I work a lot and the pool sits empty most of the time anyway. But I'd want Emma to understand some important lessons about asking permission, respecting boundaries, and being honest about where she is." Emma looked between the adults with hopeful anticipation. Sarah appeared torn between gratitude and pride, clearly uncomfortable accepting charity, but recognizing how much this would mean to her daughter. Marcus continued, "I'd also want Emma to help me with some pool maintenance and yard work. Not as punishment, but as a way to contribute and learn responsibility. And Mrs. Henderson, you'd be welcome to use the pool too, when you have time to relax." The offer hung in the air as both mother and daughter processed the unexpected generosity. Marcus waited patiently, understanding that accepting help from a stranger required swallowing pride and trusting someone they barely knew. He hoped they could see his genuine desire to help rather than any ulterior motive. The arrangement that emerged from that difficult conversation transformed both families in unexpected ways. Emma began coming over 3 afternoons a week, always with her mother's knowledge and Marcus's explicit permission. The first few visits were awkward, with Emma overly careful and Marcus unsure how to interact with a child who wasn't his own. Gradually, they developed a comfortable routine. Emma would arrive with a small notebook, where she tracked pool chemical levels and maintenance tasks Marcus taught her. She learned to test chlorine and pH levels, vacuum the pool floor, and clean the filters. In return, she earned swimming time and Marcus's patient instruction in diving techniques and competitive swimming strokes. What surprised Marcus most was how much he enjoyed having company. His pool area, once a solitary retreat, became alive with Emma's chatter about school, her father's letters from overseas, and her growing confidence in the water. She had a natural curiosity that reminded him of his younger self, asking endless questions about pool engineering, water chemistry, and Marcus's work at the electronics store. Emma's transformation was visible to the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson commented on how much happier the girl seemed, waving enthusiastically instead of hanging her head when neighbors said hello. Emma made friends with other children who were drawn to Marcus's backyard by the sound of splashing and laughter. Sarah initially remained distant, grateful but uncomfortable with the arrangement. She would pick up Emma with hurried thank yous, clearly feeling indebted. Marcus understood her discomfort but continued to extend small kindnesses. Fresh vegetables from his garden, offers to help with household repairs, invitations for family dinners that Sarah always politely declined. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult week when Sarah's car broke down. Emma mentioned the problem casually while practicing her backstroke, not realizing the transportation challenges it created for her mother's work schedule. Marcus offered to drive Sarah to her nursing shifts, an offer she initially refused but eventually accepted out of desperation. During those car rides, real conversations began. Sarah shared stories about her husband's deployment, her fears about managing everything alone, and her gratitude for Emma's renewed happiness. Marcus talked about his own childhood, growing up in a single-parent household while his mother worked multiple jobs to support the family. They discovered unexpected common ground. Both understood the weight of responsibility, the sacrifice required to provide for family, and the importance of community support during difficult times. Sarah's defensive walls began to crumble as she recognized Marcus's genuine care for Emma's well-being, rather than any expectation of repayment. The arrangement evolved naturally. Sarah began joining Emma for weekend swims when her schedule allowed. Marcus introduced them to his elderly parents who lived across town and delighted in having a young person around to spoil. Emma started calling Marcus Uncle Marcus, a title that filled him with unexpected pride and responsibility. Other neighbors noticed the positive change in the Henderson family dynamic. What had started as a trespassing incident had become a model of community support that inspired others to reach out to families facing deployment challenges. The local military family support group asked Marcus to speak about practical ways civilians could help military families during deployment cycles. 8 months later, Sergeant James Henderson returned from deployment to find his family profoundly changed. Emma had grown 3 inches and developed into a confident swimmer with perfect diving form. Sarah had completed additional nursing certifications and received a promotion that provided better work-life balance. Most surprisingly, they had formed a deep friendship with their neighbor Marcus that extended far beyond pool privileges. The homecoming celebration took place in Marcus's backyard. With decorations Emma had made herself and a barbecue feast Marcus had spent days preparing. James Henderson, initially uncertain about his family's relationship with this neighbor he had never met, quickly understood the profound impact Marcus had made during his absence. "I spent months worrying about Emma being lonely, and Sarah handling everything alone," James confided to Marcus while they watched Emma demonstrate her new diving techniques for her father. "I never imagined they would find such genuine support right next door." Emma's relationship with her father resumed seamlessly, but now she had 2 male role models who offered different perspectives and wisdom. James brought military discipline and adventure stories from overseas. Marcus provided steady presence, practical life skills, and patient guidance through everyday challenges. The lesson Emma had learned extended far beyond the consequences of trespassing. She had discovered that honest communication could transform conflict into opportunity, that accepting help required courage rather than weakness, and that community connections could provide stability during uncertain times. Marcus reflected on his own journey from angry property owner to surrogate uncle. His comfortable routine had been disrupted, his quiet pool invaded by chaos and laughter. His careful boundaries expanded to include people he never planned to care about. The experience had taught him that true security came not from locked gates and surveillance cameras, but from building relationships with the people around him. Sarah's lesson was perhaps the most complex. She had learned to accept help without losing her independence, to trust her instincts about people's character, and to recognize that her daughter needed community connections she couldn't provide alone. No matter how hard she worked, the neighborhood itself had changed. Other military families began connecting with civilian neighbors through informal networks inspired by the Henderson-Washington friendship. Children who had been spending summers isolated indoors found activities and mentorship opportunities. Adults who had lived parallel lives for years began sharing resources and support during difficult times. Emma's unauthorized pool visits had ended months earlier, but she continued swimming several times each week with full permission and enthusiasm. The fence between the 2 properties remained, but a proper gate had been installed, symbolizing that boundaries could exist without barriers when built on mutual respect and understanding. Years later, when Emma left for college on a swimming scholarship Marcus had helped her pursue, she would still credit those secret pool visits with teaching her that sometimes breaking rules led to discovering better ways to live. The trespassing incident that could have resulted in police reports and Neighborhood conflicts had instead created a chosen family bound together by unexpected circumstances and sustained by deliberate kindness. Marcus kept a photo from Emma's high school graduation on his mantle, showing three families who had become permanently intertwined through one girl's desperate desire to swim, and one man's decision to respond with curiosity rather than anger. The lesson he had taught Emma about respect and honesty had been returned to him multiplied, showing him that home wasn't just about property ownership, but about the community connections that made any place worth protecting.